Hello, welcome to the EPG Pathshala program in Linguistics. I am Pramod Pandey from Center for Linguistics, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Today we are beginning the paper 5 with the title Advanced Phonology. In paper 2 we dealt with Introduction to Phonetics and Phonology. The topics that were covered in that course were basic topics in the fields of phonetics and phonology. You were introduced to the main concepts, elementary concepts of phonetics. You also had a journey through the various important foundational topics in phonology. The most important of them was the phoneme and the methods, techniques, principles of establishing phonemes in a language. So we looked at all those things, how it is done. When you go to field work, you have to be introduced to the IPA symbols for different sounds that you experience, how to transcribe them, and then how to analyze the data using the principles of phonemic analysis so that you have a fulsome account of the phonetic and phonemic structure of languages. Remember that a paper like that is very important in the field of linguistics. It gives you the main symbols that are used in linguistics, namely the IPA symbols, International Phonetic Alphabet. That is the basic writing system of linguistics, so you have to be very familiar with it. Also, people who are interested in linguistics often demand the knowledge of IPA symbols, so that's how we spent a good deal of time doing IPA. And then we turned to the principles of phonemic analysis. In looking at phonemic analysis, we focus mainly on segmental phonology, if you recall, namely vowels and consonants and units such as these, which are traditionally called segmental phonology. That is, segments which are subject to division and segmentation. So given a word such as put, you can segment it into p, u and t. So that's why these are called segmental phonology, which consist of mainly of vowels and like u and consonants like p and t. So the method to analyze the segmental phonology was very well developed and still holds. In fact, some disciplines in the neighboring areas such as anthropological linguistics or structural anthropology, these are influenced by the phonemic principle. The notion of a structuralism, for example, is centered on the notion of the phonemic structure. The principles that were used to establish phonemes were of an abstract kind, not found in any other discipline. But these were most reliable. So that's how we spent a good deal of time doing phonemic analysis. However, as the field progressed, it was found that it is not enough for a linguist to describe only the vowels and consonants. There are other aspects of the sound structure of languages which are equally important. Structural linguistics thus separated the study of sounds which are called suprasegmental sounds or prosodic sounds. These include sounds such as the stress system of a language, the tone, intonation, juncture, and topics like these. They were called suprasegmental because they could not be segmented like vowels and consonants into small little units. Moreover, they were found to cover more than a single segment, so they were considered to be suprasegmental. Now, we found that structural phonology could also help us analyze the suprasegmental structure of languages. However, the theory was not really well developed to deal with these issues. The beginning was made, and that's how we saw how the study of intonation and of stress, the basic typology, the different types of these phenomena, different types of tones in intonational systems, different types of junctures, open and closed junctures, how these could be well described. What was not really possible within the framework of structural phonology is that you could not find really a way to explain these phenomena. You could only describe them. At this stage, we also came to have generative phonology. Generative phonology was mainly guided by the idea that the goal of linguistics is not description of languages, but rather the explanation of the nature of phonological knowledge, rather of linguistic knowledge in general. So phonology was part of a general theory of generative grammar. Now, as part of generative grammar, the main goal of phonology, generative phonology, was to find ways and means of explaining our knowledge of sounds, the way we know them, we pronounce them, the way we relate sounds and words, pronunciations of words to each other. In so doing, generative phonology could make some progress. It made considerable progress in the field of segmental phonology. However, in the field of suprasegmental phonology, it was again limited by the same constraints as structural phonology. The essence of the difficulty that both structural phonology and generative phonology faced was the concept of sounds to be arranged in a unilinear fashion. That is, you start a stretch of linguistic unit from one sound, you go to the next one, you go to the next one, you go to the next one. Now, this conception is called unilinear conception. The unilinear conception of sounds was justifiable when it came to the segmental sounds. They did not create so much difficulty in trying to explain the various phonological generalizations in languages. However, when it came to suprasegmental phenomena such as stress, tone, intonation, then it was found that they were somewhat inadequate. Now, in the present paper, we deal with, first of all, the inadequacies of generative phonology as it was first proposed. We were already introduced to some of the basic notions of generative phonology, such as distinctive features. We found how distinctive features were common both to structural phonology as well as to generative phonology. So there was not a sudden kind of a change development in phonology from structural to generative. Rather, there were ideas, concepts such as distinctive features which were taken from structural phonology into generative phonology. To repeat, even things such as the different types of stress patterns, the different levels of tone, those also were taken from structural phonology into generative phonology. Now, it so happens that in order to make explicit the knowledge of phonology of the speakers of a certain language, it was found that the best way to do it was through rules, phonological rules. So that's the basic model of generative phonology. You have two different levels of structure, that's called underlying representation, and then the surface representation of sounds, and then in between you have phonological rules. What is the function of underlying representation? It is to be able to show that two related morphemes are actually related. How? Because both of them come from the same underlying representation. So when you have forms such as divine and divinity, you know that the native speaker somehow relates these words, divine and divinity. The problem is how to show this relationship. If we use only the IPA transcription, then the segmental structure will be d, e, v, I, n, whereas in divinity it will be d, e, v, e, n. Now, I and e are two different phonemes in the language. That means that the two are different words, but we know that for the native speaker of English and those who speak English even as a second language, somehow the word divinity and the word divine are related to each other. So the notion of underlying representation was essentially to capture the relatedness between such forms. Now you notice that when we have divine and divinity both being related, then what is the underlying representation like? So in generative phonology, what you do is you will have something like a basic abstract structure, such as you will say that divine and divine both come from the same underlying representation, namely divine. That's what the generative phonology said. You have divine. The long vowel E is diphthongized in the word divine. In the word divinity, a word where the E is followed by two more syllables, like niti, then the E is shortened by a rule. So we have then two rules proposed in the grammar, namely divine, where E becomes I, and in divinity where E becomes short E. And then finally then you will have divinity as the form in divinity and divine as the form for the morpheme divine. Thus, the pronunciations divine and divinity are surface level pronunciations. At the underlying level, you have the same underlying representation. Now, in this conception, in this model of generative phonology, phonological rules played a very, very important part. Without the notion of phonological rules, you could not relate the underlying representation to the surface representation. So the only way to show that the words such as divinity and divine are related was posit an underlying representation and then posit phonological rules and show how those rules bring about a change in the word divine, iti, as divinity, and the word divine alone as divine. There are many other words of the same nature to show that these rules were of a general nature. For example, you have words such as devout and devotion. So you have devout, the underlying representation must be u, and then you have certain rules whereby u can become o can become shortened u, and also the shortened u may become something like in certain forms. So the basic thing that was kept in mind was the fact that the rules expressed a generalization. They were not ad hoc rules. And that was a great achievement. Generative phonology explored various ways and means of making explicit the knowledge of language by means of the devices, the formal devices of a rule. So many devices were proposed, such as these formal devices, such as, say, braces and parentheses and so on, angled brackets, the rewrite rule, the environment, and all these gave us an idea about the formal nature of a phonological rule. So it was found that the notion of a phonological rule played a crucial role, and it was claimed that perhaps the rules that native speakers have in their mind brain are also somewhat like the rules that generative phonology proposes in the grammars, in the phonological grammars of languages. Now, there was so much has been gained by going into the depth of phonological rules that there came a stage where when it came to certain phenomena such as stress and tone and intonation, then it was somehow felt that the phonological rules that were proposed to explain the knowledge of stress and tone and intonation somehow did not reveal the knowledge of these phenomena and processes. There were many complications. For example, the rules had to be very, very complicated in trying to capture the generalizations. There was no clear way of doing looking at the tonal phenomena, and intonation was barely studied. Whatever studies we had was of a very superficial nature to start with. And so when the linguist phonologists turned their attention to the generalizations concerning prosodic phenomena like stress, tone, and intonation, then the phonological rules were found to be too complicated and certainly not very revealing about the knowledge of language. It was at that stage that generative phonology came to find solutions to these problems. The major solution came through a change in the very notion of phonological representation, as you will study in this course. The notion of a rule had to be overhauled, actually, had to be sort of examined at every stage. Now, so phenomena, for example, such as stress and at the word level, stress at the phrase level, at the sentence level, all these came to be very elegantly analyzed if the notion of phonological representation was changed from segmental to suprasegmental, as you will notice in the diagram that follows. Now, if we represent sounds in that fashion, then the rule need not take all these segments into account. You can take into account, let us say, mention the syllable, for example, as the one which is stressed, the first syllable or the second syllable or the first syllable. So all the segmental sounds need not be mentioned. Now, this is regarding the analysis of stress in languages. When it came to the analysis of tone, then the study of the various aspects of tonal phenomena challenged the way the segmental phonology could be used to describe them. There were processes such as, you will look at these modules that follow, and the processes such as, let's say, in an African language, you have words, compound words, and then these compound words have a certain tonal structure. So you have something like ova, and then you have the same word, ova, and then we find that when you put them together, then the middle oa, you get the vowel in between are deleted in this language. So you don't have oa, you get ovoa. Now, ovoa. Now what happens is, ovoa is that in the first, although the vowel is deleted, but a complex tone emerges. So whereas earlier it was oa, now it is ovoa. Now this was mysterious within the segmental phonology. How will you describe this? The vowels are deleted and then the tone changes. Now if you want to describe the change, then you can think of something like this. Let us keep these segments, vowels and consonants at one level, and let us assume that there is another independent level of tones. because the tones remain the same. You have high tone, you have low tone, and then say low and high tone. Then what happens is that the low high tone remains, although the vowel is dropped. So this is something that had to be given a name. The word autosegmental was given to this theory or sub-theory of phonology, which proposed that the phonological structure is not at simply one level, but can be at more than one level. They were called tiers of phonology. So you have autosegmental tiers. Once the notion of autosegmental tier was brought in, it was found that it was a very fertile notion. What we mean by fertile notion? What we mean by fertile notion is that it could be used to describe or explain not only phenomena of tone, but also many other spreading phenomena, such as vowel harmony, such as assimilation. So these processes, such as vowel harmony or assimilation, which were explained in segmental phonology, appear to be very arbitrary. There didn't seem to be any reason why these processes were taking place. But when we describe them in the autosegmental framework, then we find that they have a very insightful explanation. So the theory was slowly developing into an explanatory theory, a theory which tried to explicate, make explicit the phonological knowledge of the native speaker of a language. In advanced phonology, we try to look at these sub-theories which were developed to explain the phenomena of stress, the phenomena of tone. It is not the case that the notion of rules was entirely given up, especially segmental rules. There was progress being made in the fields of phonology, for example, and there were segmental phenomena which did not require any nonlinear phonological theory such as metrical phonology or autosegmental phonology, but segmental phonology, phonological rules were found to be okay. However, there were certain phenomena, generalizations, which seemed to be a mystery to the traditional way of doing phonology. For example, you have certain prefixation, let us say something like in plus legal is illegal. We say in plus regular is irregular, but actually the native speakers don't pronounce them as illegal or irregular. They pronounce them as illegal or irregular. No geminate consonants are allowed. No geminate consonants are allowed to persist, although there are two consonants in the orthographic system, but actually they are both pronounced as single consonants. There is this process called degemination, that is, geminate consonants become single consonants. However, there is a prefixation, namely unprefixation, in words such as unnatural. Now, when it comes to unnatural, the geminate n remains. Nobody says unnatural, say unnatural. Now, how do you explain this? The fact that in many forms, especially in prefixation, there is no gemination, but unprefixation, there is gemination. Now, in order to explain these processes as psychologically explainable, psychologically real, a new theory came to be proposed, namely lexical phonology. The theory of lexical phonology mainly was concerned with the issue of the organization of phonological rules. So there are phonological rules, no doubt. Phonological rules may be ordered in relation to each other, as we will see in the present course and in the modules that follow this introductory module. But that was not enough. So it came to be shown that actually there are two submodules of phonological rule applications. So rules which apply within words in general, within words, and rules which apply across words. Now, rules which apply within words again can be ordered as level 1, level 2, stratum 1, stratum 2, etc. So, the theory of lexical phonology used this notion of level ordering, and it was shown that an in-prefixation is a level 1 rule where degemination takes place. But degemination stops taking place after level 1 rule. So when unprefixation takes place, then there is no degemination rule to apply, and therefore the geminate consonants remains geminate. Now, this was a very insightful explanation of the difference between in-prefixation and unprefixation. Apart from these, there were other facts which could be explained in a very simple and elegant manner only if you allowed there to be level ordering of rules. We have had ordering of rules, rule 1, rule 2, rule 3, rule 4, etc. But we had no notion that actually these rules can be grouped into as applying to different modules. Let us say the lexical phonological module, within lexical phonological module, stratum 1, stratum 2. So this way, a theory of lexical phonology tried to even further explain the problems in segmental phonology. Apart from these issues, as the theory of metrical phonology came to grow into a theory of prosodic phonology, many segmental phenomena which were assumed to be segmental were found to be actually dependent on the prosodic structure. For example, in Hindi, if you want to say the sentence, "This is an elephant," you will say, "Ye ek hathi hai." So, and in answer to a question, "What is this? Ye kya hai?" you will say, "Hathi." The two sentences, the hathi in these two sentences, in these two utterances rather, ek hathi hai and ye kya hai? Hathi. When you say hathi, hathi hai, hathi. Now what you find is in the one word utterance hathi, the E is much longer than hathi hai. If you want to make it long in that hathi hai sentence, ek hathi hai, it sounds very odd. That's not natural. So how do we explain this difference in the final vowels of the word hathi in these two utterances? This could be very easily explained now within the theory that came to be developed called prosodic phonology. So it was shown that if there is an utterance final long vowel like hathi, kya hai? Hathi, then it could be long. But if it is phrase final at the end of a phrase, ye ek hathi, and then hai, then the final vowel of hathi will be short. So there is a difference in the length of segments, of the vowel segments here, which can be explained in terms of the what we call prosodic structure. That is, at the end of a phrase or at the end of an utterance, and so on. So the theory of prosodic phonology came to be fairly well developed. It came to be shown that this theory not only explains prosodic phenomena per se, but also shows the relationship between phonology and syntax, phonology and semantics, the whole notion of information structure, that is structuring the message, the information of a sentence, was shown to be actually involving both the phonology, the syntax, and the semantics of a sentence. Now, without prosodic phonology, there couldn't be seen to be a very clear relation between phonology, syntax, and semantics. Now, all along, we also came to have very crucial developments in phonetics. And one of the things that we noticed in advanced phonology is that all phonological generalizations always are found, are sort of supported by phonetic experiments, experimental evidence. So actually you came to have a whole theory called laboratory phonology. But that can be an extreme case. However, there is no advanced phonology possible unless the generalizations that we make about phonological processes, such as stress, tone, intonation, etc., they have some phonetic evidence. So we also came to have a good deal of experimental phonetics supporting the study of phonology. We came to have a kind of a close relationship between the two. This course, Advanced Phonology, deals with all these things that we have discussed. From the modules that follow this, we begin with discussing the limitations of linear phonology, and we begin with introducing ourselves to the sub-theories of nonlinear phonology. One of the things that you should notice is, or you should remember, is the fact that the sub-theories have a certain relationship with the processes and phenomena. So you have to have a very clear understanding of which sub-theory applies to the description, explanation of which phenomena. That is something that we will be concerned with throughout this course. Thank you.